Hi, my name is Randall Bartlett. I'm going to show you a painting. This is the end of the painting, but I'm going to show you what I completed, and I'm going to do a demo of this painting so you can have a look at it. So, here's the finished painting. I'm going to back off a little bit, let you see this. You can see some of the details that we're going in through where I scratched some of the elements here of the tree limbs, maybe a little bit of rocky shore. Using a fine liner brush to create some grass. A little bit of the reflection here from the tree line, the kind of sandy, light shore. I did this to add contrast, and then the distant background, and maybe, where you don't really know if that kind of meanders back around, and then the trees here. So let me get started with a demonstration. Do a landscape, waterscape. It's going to be a lake or creek along something you would see along the southern coast, maybe in South Alabama, where I grew up. So now I'm wetting my paper. So I'm going to work on the sky first, and I'm going to use my palette's a little bit messy, as you can see. So I'm going to clean up a little bit and pick up a little bit of burnt raw sienna, excuse me here. It's a little bit green looking, so I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit. I'm going to clean my brush. I have a tea towel down here that I'm dabbing it on. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this golden kind of color, if you will, just a little bit along here. It's a little bit green, but that's okay. We'll let it go there. And you can see it running down. Ultramarine blue. So I'm going to pick in and put some of this sky. And you see how the wet's going down and how it's dripping down. Not too concerned about that at the moment, because there's going to be some water down in this area here. So I'm working that water in through here. Again, I can clean my brush, dab it a little bit, and pick up some of this, maybe where along the horizon where that would be. I'm going to let my horizon line be somewhere just about halfway. Now, I know people would say that's not the best place for your horizon, but I don't know if that's that critical. It depends if you want more sky shown or less sky shown. So I'm softening this up a little bit, kind of dabbing, picking up a little bit of the color, removing some of the color, I guess, if you will. It's a little bit light here. Perhaps I could dab in a few clouds and move that along there. Again, I think I need to go a little bit bluer, so I'm going to grab some more of this ultramarine here and pick up that, get a little bit bluer sky, and perhaps down in the water a little bit too here. So you can see the sky beginning to develop, and you can see some of the water. So now I'm dabbing my brush again and picking up some of this where maybe it's beginning to puddle a little bit, and kind of blending that in. I'm cleaning my brush, and here I got a paper towel I'm cleaning it with and picking up some of that as well. And don't know if it's really clouds or not, but we'll kind of assume that. Now what I'm looking to do here is I want it to be a little bit lighter down at the horizon. I'm talking about the sky. So the sky is going to, and it naturally happens, this is kind of what we call aerial perspective or atmospheric perspective, where it gets a little bit lighter as it meets the horizon. So I'm going to let this just kind of sit for a little bit. Now I'm going to put some distance tree lines. I'm going to have a big tree over here and some other trees over in this area, but I want some distant trees back here to kind of give some depth to this painting. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of, I already got some green going from a previous painting, but basically this is lemon yellow with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and my favorite paint, which some people don't really care for, is, but I like it a lot, and that is Payne's Gray. So this is going to be a little bit of a bluish kind of a background. So I'm going to pick up that to be kind of somewhere in here. So I'm just kind of dabbing it in there where that would be. Don't really quite know how big this tree line is going to be over in here, but I want to fade this out just along the horizon. Maybe trying to set some distance trees in the background. So it's a little bit green, but I think that's okay. And that sets that a little bit further back here. Not that I'm trying to create a mist, but I want those to be further back. Could just put a hint here, which may get covered up by the other tree, but just a hint of where that would be. So here's these trees kind of in the background. Now I can take a small rigger brush, or I found this little fine liner. I actually found it at Hobby Lobby. I think it's $3.90. Look how long the hair is on that thing. It's about I think about an inch or so long. I never have really measured how long it would be. It's about 1.125 inches long of hairs there. So I can kind of just peel up some of this, maybe get a little bit darker, and maybe there's some distant tree limbs back here, branches coming up, or maybe just some tree trunks in that area. Just pull it in the back. So I'm just pulling some of these up along here. They'll probably go away, but as the watercolor paper begins to dry, they'll probably be eliminated. But I'm picking up a few of those, as you can see, coming through here. And you can start to see the sky starting to... Now, I could have dried this a little bit, but I think it's okay because I like it being wet here because it's going to soften up all of this a little bit. I will come back and darken that in a few minutes. So that's kind of where that horizon will be. Now let's try to create us a little bit of a foreground, and I'm going to change and go with a round brush here, as you can see. I think it's a number 8, and I'm going to mix up just some of this raw sienna that I had going on because I want kind of a little bit of a bank here. So I'm going to mix it in with that a little bit and pick it up. I know I'm going to come back darker. I'm going to mix in a little bit and create just a little bit of a bank here. So that bank could be something about like that. And you know what, just for sake of time, I'm going to change and just go back with this Ron Ranson, this 1-inch wide hake brush. And kind of do the same thing over here a little bit. But then this is going to be bigger. I'm going to fill in larger. Well, this bank is even closer to me here again. And so I'm going to come down into this area. Now, I'd like to have here a little bit of more value change. So I'm picking up a little bit of burnt umber here. And I'll even pick up some of this Payne's gray and a little bit of yellow to kind of get me a green. That got way too dark there. You can see it's way too dark there. But I'll just kind of dab in some of this in a minute here. And I know that's going to be dark along this line here. So I'm going to put some of this in here, knowing that that's going to be there. And it's going to darken up in a few minutes as it gets. So it's a little bit harsh to begin with. I'm going to clean my brush and let that just kind of blend in. So I'm working very wet on the wet, as you can tell. And I can pick up now some of this and blend it with just a damp brush. So that brush is damp there. Again, this is another kind of this undergrowth, if you will. And then this is going to be that other bank line here. So you can already start to see what's happening as this is becoming the water here. And then here's this big tree line coming up over on this side of the bank here. So I'm mixing up I'm actually using Payne's gray and my lemon yellow to kind of get a green there. And I kind of like a dark green. And I'm going to pick back some of that into here. It's a little bit lighter, but it's okay at the moment. And again, that's back on that edge there, and that's that other bank that's coming across here. So we'll put just a little dab in there. I think it's good to vary your colors as you can. Not all just have one solid color. Again, you can kind of see now how this bank is being pulled out here. And I'm going to have I will have in this area some reflections of the tree line that's coming through here. So as this is beginning to dry a little bit, I'm going to go just a little bit darker into this area. You can see some of the colors I'm mixing up here. I'm picking up a little bit of that raw sienna, burnt umber, a little bit of the yellow, a little bit of the Prussian blue. I mean, not Prussian blue, but the ultramarine blue, and getting another nice green here. So now I'm just dabbing in where some tree lines might be. And this is kind of the under branches. And just, again, I'm just building up this area right there. As you can see, I will eventually get darker there. Always start light and then go darker. So now, where is this tree line here? This is still very wet here. But let's try to go ahead and establish some of that. So I'm going to go a little bit wetter here. A little bit drier here with my colors. Just a little bit to get that kind of a little bit darker in some of this area here. So, and if I was real wet, it would begin. So now I'm just kind of building up what might be some trees, using the end of the brush here and building up some of that, and maybe filling in. I'm going to go put some branches in here in just a few minutes here. So now that tree line's beginning to get a little bit darker, as you can see, starting to become a little more evident of what it is. I still want to go darker in that, so I'm going to go just a little bit more. I picked up some of that Payne's gray, kind of that Payne's gray green that I had, and building that up a little bit. And now I want to go, this is starting to dry a little bit here, a little bit. So I'm going to try to take my brush, and you can see what I'm doing here. Let me see if I can show it here. Yeah, I'm trying to blend in, making a kind of a chisel point with that brush, just a little bit. And I'm using the edge of this brush, so I'm going to build up where this bank would be here. You know, there's that bank line. Again, dabbing some of that in there. There's still going to be distance. And now this bank, I want to define this bank here a little bit stronger here. So I'm building this up a little bit darker in this area here. And then maybe some of this is coming out here. I'm going to even try to get more of a chisel point if I can. Still a little wet, so we'll may let that sit. So now you can begin to see what's happening here. There will be something here with this. Maybe there's a little bit of a build out here of some of a mud bank here. So let's really go dark here for a second. Let's go and really try to get some, put that really back there on that bank there. I liking that, what's happening here. Still now go darker even back over in here and picking up some of this. So you begin to now see what's happening here. I need to change the color a little bit. I'm kind of dominating a little bit, so I'm picking up a little bit of the lemon yellow and trying to change some of the colors in there. Let's pick up some of this, clean my brush a little bit here and pick up that raw sienna. It's still kind of going to be green, but it's got a little bit of that golden kind of a color in it, and blend this in a little bit better here. I don't really know if I care for that lemon yellow being so bold there. And now I'll build out some more. It's still a little bit dark. Again, we're just making up and using the tip of this brush to create some of these leaves that might be coming out of this tree line here, as you can see. So begin to build that up. I want this bank to be a little bit lighter here. It's gotten a little bit darker, so I'm picking up with a damp brush, just trying to lighten that up a little bit. It just got a little bit too dark on me. And same thing in here. Some of this is, you can still see it's very, very wet. And building this up a little bit. You know, sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a flow, a little bit of a white space. So I'm just lifting with this brush to try to calm some of this down here. All right, now let's go back to, I'm gonna get a different brush here. Go with what is this brush here? This is a 0, kind of a long round brush here, if you can see that. It's a 0. And I'm gonna use this to help me with some of my tree trunks here. Because I know I've got to have some kind of change here where this is maybe some tree branches that are coming out of here. So I'm using basically Payne's gray. I'm picking up a little bit of burnt umber here as well. And then I'm just building in some of this a little bit to kind of help me create some of those branches. Not trying to draw them literally in there, just picking up some of these, and maybe on this bank here. You know, maybe with some of those. And I'm using the end of the brush, as you can see, to kind of do that. Now let's go back on the right side and do the same thing here, where this is coming out. I need this to be really a lot darker in here, so I'm going to build this up a little bit. It's not quite as dark as I'd like for it to be. That's basically some brown there. So again, these are some branches. Now they'll fade out a little bit. Again, this is that baseline here. That's the, I'm sure you've seen this technique I'm about to do, is where you kind of scratch some things in there. Now I've got an old hotel card here that I've got, and And it's an interesting way of doing it, and I can kind of scratch in some branches here. You know, not all branches are going to be dark. You know, the tendency sometimes is to overdo that, and then it'll fill back in. I have taken and sharpened one edge, you know, cut one edge of this card. It's rounded, but I've sharpened it on one edge to get a little bit of sharper. People have used their fingernails, so I could scratch in maybe some of this here. You know, this is still kind of wet there, and just, you know, picking up some of that. Now there's some nice, maybe that's a little bit of a rocky area there. So I'm just, you know, using this as a way to change some of the values. And same thing on this way. Maybe there's some rocks on this shore over here where it's coming in, and I can blend this out. I can also maybe make that kind of a grassy area. And same thing in this area here. I'm right-handed, but I'm scratching down my left hand so I can see from the camera. So that could be kind of a rocky little area right there. And let's say we don't like the way that looks, then I can always just take and blend that out and soften that back up, or go back over with a little bit of paint. But now you begin to see the establishment of this loose painting. I feel like there ought to be a little more back in the background there. So I'm going to go back to that kind of a bluish green color, gray bluish green color that I started with, and just kind of dabble in some stuff. Now it's a little dark at the moment, but I'm going to soften that up here a little bit. Just want a little. Didn't think I kind of had much of a tree line there. It kind of faded away. I may have done it with a little bit too wet there. And again, I can come in here and scratch some stuff in here a little bit. Now that's going to dry lighter, so I know that. So there's that. So now you really begin to see this beginning to establish itself. Now I want this bank to be a little bit darker here. So I'm going to go back pretty much with some Payne's Gray. And build out and do the same thing. There's that bank there. But on this bank, there may be, you know, as we had before, maybe there's a little bit of a rock formation there. So now I can come back and I can, you know, once paint's still wet, I can scratch in a few rocks. And maybe there's a little bit of highlights on some of these crazy little branches and limbs, you know, it's stagnant, because this is how this water's going to be. So look like what's happening here. You can see that kind of a light, misty background, even a reflection here that's beginning to start and happen. I'll darken this up a little bit to create that bank. So now let's do this reflection here. So I got to have a reflection coming from these trees down into this area. I think my paint's, you know, still kind of wet. I can always come back and just wet it a little bit here, and then pick up some of those colors that were there. You know, it's a little bit too wet. I probably should have just left it alone. But I'm going to pick up some of that reflection that was coming off of those trees up there. So similar colors, you know, that I'm dealing with here. I'll just pick up along this bank here, and let that just kind of bleed in to create that. It will get darker. See how I left a little bit of light there. That's just trying to keep, maybe to find that shoreline. It's not critical. And then these branches that were there, you know, so I'm going to my Payne's Gray. You know, there's some lines coming through here, right? There were some of these tree limbs that were coming that need to be reflected down there. And maybe it's greener in some areas, which you know, my colors are pretty much the same. So I'm going to change in a little bit of the color here to get a little bit of a different value in that. And that's kind of that reflection that's happening. So I'm basically painting the trees just upside down there. And it's going to lighten, and that's some of that going on. So that's kind of where we are on that. So we'll let that kind of dry. And you can see that. I could take this brush, the number 0 brush that I had, you know, I can kind of squiggle it in a little bit. It can kind of define it, make it a little bit smaller here, where some of those darker branches might have been in there. So that's going to give me my reflection. And I can soften it up if I need to. I can take a paper towel and I can dab in some areas if it's maybe, you know, not quite working, to kind of get some of that sky back in there. Well, it's still really wet, isn't it? But I like some of that technique that's happening there. It's a little bit more defined here. Again, that dark area, you know, where's that dark area? So in my reflection. So let's put that in there and let that just sit. So let's let that go. Let's go back over here and work this side a little bit more now that we've got a little bit drier. So I'm picking up some of that same kind of green, trying to vary the color just a little bit. So if I can get some of this raw sienna color that I had earlier. And there's that raw sienna color that's coming in there and picking up some that's a little bit darker. And I really want to soften this up. It got a little bit too harsh here. It's always going to dry lighter now, right? We know that it's always going to dry a little bit lighter. A little bit, I probably need to fill that in. That scratching got a little bit crazy there. So let's fill that in just a little bit here. Now, while that's getting somewhat dry, I love this technique because we don't even really paint the water. You know, we don't even really paint the water. It just tends to happen. If this was drier here, which I'm going to take a hair dryer and just dry off just a little bit here, just to kind of I want to do some things in here that I can't do. So I'm forcing it. I really like how that looks right there. So that's pretty dry now. And what I'm going to do is take this brush I showed you earlier, one of my favorite brushes, and go back with some of those colors that I had here. And let's pick up some, you know, we need some clumps of grass in here. So this is foreground. So this is my detail area, if you will. This is going to kind of give us a little bit of a, I guess the word I'm looking for perhaps maybe might be a, you know, the foreground. So I'm just kind of blending that in. I even try a little bit of yellow in here. It's a little bit different. And I'm just taking the brush, and you can see that I'm using the paint that's built up on there, that's built up here in this area, and I'm letting that become where these kind of this grassy twigs may be along this area here. And this brush is just so fun because you can just let it go. You know, you can let it take on its own little establishment here, because it's kind of fun. Now, you know, how much of this do we do? You know, where do we go here? Do we go a little bit darker in here? You know, I kind of want to just to vary a little bit in here. So, you know, because I need something in this area. You know, so this is some of that grass that's growing up on the bank here. You know, maybe there's a few little shadows that come across here. So I'm just basically trying to not like it looks so fixed in this area, and let that just happen. So there's that area there. Now I'm going to go with Payne's Gray. I'm going to change brush, another little brush, same basically the same style of brush. It's just maybe a 1/2 inch long fine liner. And to me, I like this one because now I can get into here and I can put some of this reflection off of here. You know, some of the reflection that was coming off in this area here. And again, I can put some of the grass, maybe this little bank comes out a little bit further here. You know, there's a little bit of grass off of it, perhaps. You know, this is mud banks. And that can go really dark in here if I want to. You know, I'm kind of using the dry brush technique there. Same thing here. This one, maybe we have another one of these mud banks that come off of here. So you can see how the brush is working here. And then, you know, this is that back horizon line there. Again, I'm not trying to, it's real. So you can see how these kind of meet in this area. As you can look at that and say, okay, maybe that's where this thing folds out and where that water trickles back into there. Now, I mentioned earlier about coming in this area where, okay, where's the bank here? You know, this kind of is establishing a little bit of the bank. So I'm going to put a little bit darker underneath that, and it kind of goes back into there. So you got like a little bit of a slough that maybe goes back into there. Again, you know, this is, you know, this on a heavy rain, this whole thing changes, right? And this whole landscape changes. So this is just something that I kind of grew up seeing these kind of mud banks here. going across there. You know, probably could have left some of that reflection. I think maybe I thought it was a little bit too dark to begin with. Now that it's dry, I feel like I need a little bit more. So I'm going to just put, while my paint is still kind of somewhat wet here, I'm going to add a little bit more color back into this and try to get some of that reflection falling back into this. What helps is this, as long as this area here is fairly dark along this bank here, then that reflection will work. You know, so there's that reflection again coming back through here. I really wouldn't see a reflection here because this tree would bounce back through here, but you would see it in that area right there. Let's, as we finish this, I really would like for this to be a little bit darker here. And then, so I'm going pretty much straight Payne's gray in this area right here. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pick up that, you know, that brush I was having. Well, this is the same similar one. We'll just use this one and get some of those colors back in there. That maybe this is that, you know, that grassy area that's popping up here. It's nice to have it lighter here, because if it's lighter this way, this gives this, you know, contrast in here where maybe this mud bank, grass bank was here. You know, pull some across here, pull some across into that area, because that's going to give that some light there. You know, can you overwork it? Yeah, but you know, this is just a fun way to do a painting. You know, I think we're going to call that done. Now it's going to dry a little bit lighter than this, but I think it's got some nice things going on in the background. You know, you can kind of see that real far distance. You know, maybe there's a hint of trees in there. You know, this little clump here is a little bit, you know, it could be broken up a little bit. So I'm just using wet water, I mean, just a damp brush, clear water to kind of clean up some of that. We'll let that go. That's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. I will be using this demonstration. I'll be doing a watercolor workshop in about a week, and so I'm going to be using this at one of the workshops. I'm not sure which one this is going to be. That's a little bit dark right there, isn't it? You know, so I'm studying my painting. I'm taking a look at it and coming back and thinking maybe I did need to do something here. So I think what I'm going to do, I'll see if it'll scratch out. It may not scratch. It may be too, yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit too dry to scratch out. So we'll have to let that go. So I'll put a little bit more paint in it here. And maybe that'll scratch through that. Let's see if that'll work. Yeah. So that was just some Payne's gray that I put on there. So I just try to break up that a little bit. It was a little bit solid here. You know, that looks a little fakey, but I think it's okay for this time of painting. You know, the things I didn't paint, really, you know, this is that high contrast where that water is light. I think that worked out well. Well, thank you for viewing, and I hope you enjoyed this demo.